Hello everyone, this is Muhammad Atif Ali. We will be talking about the article given below. Divestment response to host country terrorist attack. Interfirm influence and the role of temporal consistency by Chang Liu and Dang Li. The objective of this article is to demonstrate the social amplification of terrorism threat by multinational enterprises, hereafter referred as MNEs, in a response to host countries' exogenous shocks and on inter-firm imitations. To examine the role of temporal consistencies in inter-firm imitation under extreme uncertainties and determine how MNCs are more likely to divest under the host country terrorist attacks when peers also divest. So basically, we are going to understand how a multinational enterprise responds to a country which has been under a shock of terrorist attack, where the other firms, similar firms, and other MNEs have de-invested, and with the fact that they usually imitate each other and how far they go with the imitation. Let's first understand what divestment due to terrorism is. Divestment is a decision that managers make for a company to take itself away from a country. So divestment is a highly costly and a very difficult to reverse decision. While terrorism poses a growing and widespread threat to all MNEs global operations. In 2018 alone, 103 countries were affected by terrorist attacks. Together, these countries account for 86% of the world's accumulated FDI. What happens with these MNEs is that they usually depend on the peer firms, the firms that are similar to them in the country, and they usually imitate each other's actions. The literature argues that the peers' actions reveal information about how they assess a situation and whether they view a specific action as a sensible in this situation or not. They consider others' behavior or a particular influential information source in context of characterized with high uncertainty. The article argues that the current terrorist attack presents uncertainty for both focal MNE, the MNE that we are currently looking at, and its peers, making all of them equally uninformed, where they do not have enough information to make a decision. Thus, current divestments may not reflect the actual impact of the current incidents. And secondly, co-occurrences of peers, de-investment, and terrorist attack may be random. This is because there could be coincidences that cause that. Peers de-investment may not be attributable to the current attacks and thus may not provide relevant information about the current incidents. So, relying on that information might not be a great idea. Therefore, MNEs may view peers' current action as best as an insufficient information source, thus seeking more information from peers' past actions under terrorist attacks to assess the impact of the current attacks. Uh, the, to the extent which peers' behavioral pattern under terrorist attacks is consistent over time, we will be uh, we will be using consistency as a factor in this article. Taking a closer look on theoretical framework of this article, we have host country terrorist attacks on the right side, I mean the left side, and the decision that the managers make, MNE's divestment on the right side. Uh, H1A, H1B are current divestments of same industries from home country peers and geographically proximate home country peers. So these are two types of peers we are looking at, and H2 H2A, H2B are temporal consistency of the same industry home peers and proximate home peers. So this is going to give us a clear idea about how does this actually uh, influence the decision of divestment. Let's define the hypothesis more clearly in this slide. We can take an example if we want to. Let's consider home country as Iran and host country as India. So our hypothesis 1A says when same home country peers, that is peers of the company in Iran, divest after a terrorist attack in a host country, terrorist attack in India. So, so the relationship between terrorist attack and a focal MNE's divestment from the country will be more positive than this when same industry home country peers to not divestment. So we are going to be testing this hypothesis, and the second one, 1B, would be the similar condition, but we will be looking at geographically proximate home country peers. So for example, any other companies that are based in Iran and have operations in India. So we will be looking at geographically proximate home country peers divestment after terrorist attack in host country. The relationship between terrorist attacks and focal MNE's divestment from that country will be more positive than when geographically proximate home country peers do not divest. So we will be testing these two in one group, and the other two will be temporal consistency of these two. So in 2A, we will be checking the temporal consistency of same industry home peers divestment pattern. And in 2B, we'll be checking temporal consistency in geographical proximate home country peers divestment patterns. So let's now look at the data and understand how we got the data, and then we can discuss the results. So the data is sourced from Fortune US 100 firms during 2005 to 15. This yielded from 152 companies. They hand collected the information from subsidiaries of 10Ks and LexisNexis corporate affiliations databases. They have only considered uh, majority owned subsidiaries because MNEs have greater control over investment divestments of these subsidiaries. After excluding observations with systematic missing information, they retained only 93 MNEs, which had 8698 unique foreign subsidiaries in 70 different countries. Their final sample was 15,978 firm country year observations within the decade of 2005 to 2015. For terrorist attacks, they collected data of terrorist attacks in each host country where these subsidiaries were located during the 10 years from global terrorism database, and within that they focused on targets that were business related, which had a significant decrease in FDI inflow of that country. So we are going to be using percentage investment change as a dependent variable. This percentage is calculated by subtracting subsidiary count of a company at 1 year and comparing it with the next year and dividing it with the total subsidiary count. And the second is the severity of host country terrorist attack, the terrorism, which refers to the total fatalities caused by the business-related terrorist attacks in a host country where many subsidiaries are located in a given year. So, like comparing it year by year, and we are looking at 70 different countries for this data. And with this, we are also going to be taking a look at different control variables such as market size, market growth, FDI, land area, population density, wars, other attacks, past average severity, and geographic distance. We'll also take a look at common language, colonial links, and more different variables such as institutional distance, investments, M&I size, R&D intensity, marketing intensity, portfolio risk, etc. We will be now examining the results of this article. First, we'll go through the hypothesis one. This is the graph, and the hypothesis one was looking at the moderate effect of the same industry home contributors current investments. It's the same for the other graphs too. I'll just tell you what's on the x and the y axis, and the x axis represents the terrorism, which is from low to high, and the percentage investment change on the y axis, which goes from -1 to uh, upper limits. As you can see, when the same industry country peers in divestments are low, the marginal effect on terrorism does not differ from zero, as you can see here. And there is a 2.8% change in the high indicators uh, uh, where the terrorism is high here. And similarly for geographically proximate home countries, you can see the same patterns here where there is a very minimal change in the low end, and drastically more change in the high end. And this proves the hypothesis 1A and 1B are both accepted, as these two are proven right. Now looking at the temporal consistency graphs, we have four indicators on this one. Similar to the last one, the low end ones and the high end ones. The low where the divestment is low in the pairs, and high where the divestment is high. And in the lows, we have inconsistent and the consistent patterns, where you have companies that have shown different consistencies. When being inconsistent is represented by the blue one, this one, and the red one shows as the consistent ones. And then we have the inconsistent ones for the uh, high divestment, and the consistent one for the low divestment. Similar to the previous hypothesis, we see that wherever there is a low divestment change, the difference is very minimal. It is negligible. And when there is high divestment, companies do divest a lot. But when there is an inconsistent pattern, you can see the uh, difference is similar to the ones where the divestment is low. So what we can make sure from this is that companies use this information, uh, but only when there is a consistent divestment pattern. That is when they actually make a difference. But otherwise, they only use this information just to make a decision as a simple factor, but not completely on it. So this also proves our hypothesis as accepted. Similarly for the hypothesis 2b. And then that's it for testing of this hypothesis. Now let's have a discussion about what we learned from this. So in conclusion, we can say that by looking at the previous slide, we concluded that there are positive relation between the influence of divestment of the same industry home country peers and geographical proximate home country peers. As the graphs, you could see that they had the similar patterns, and the impact of peers divestment is stronger only when there is temporal consistency in peers divestment pattern. Uh, But we also concluded that it is very vital for the focal MNE to have their own internal knowledge and information about the incident to impact on their own divestments. So they will look at other companies and imitate, but only when there is a strong temporal consistency in that company's outlook. Otherwise, they use their internal information and knowledge to make that decision. Now let's see how we can use this information that we learned from the previous slides uh, in Canadian context. As a manager, you should always consider your idiosyncratic situations when formulating responses rather than just following peers' actions. So let's not focus on peers' actions unless and until you see a strong temporal consistency in their decision making systems, and only then make a decision. So do not just blindly follow, make your research and then decide what you want to do. And even then you should not be just taking the firm's action as uh, something that you should be thinking about, but you should also be mindful of their being the company that you are looking at is also influenced by other peers that they have, and this pattern under terrorism is consistent over time doesn't actually imply that the actions are repeatedly uh, correct for your situation. So you have to evaluate each situation as their own and only then make a decision. And then I have a final suggestion to make, and then we will conclude this. The final suggestion is the Canadian government should take prompt actions to stabilize the situation when there is a terrorist attack. Hopefully there won't be one, but if there is some, uh, it, the government needs to take prompt action to help MNEs recover from losses after terrorist attacks. Otherwise, MNEs lose interest, and losing interest and business is not good for any government, let alone Canada. So that's it. That concludes my presentation. Many thanks to the Professor Salman for this opportunity. This presentation was made in intention for international business class for fall 2021 at TRU. My name is Mohammad Atif Ali and I'm signing off. Thank you so much for listening.